All right, good afternoon. The time is 4:07 p.m. It is June 5th, 2025. This is a special meeting workshop of the Argyle AISD Board of Trustees. At this time, we will determine if a quorum is present.
Leona McDade, present.
Rich McDowell, present.
Leanne Artho, present.
Sam Slayton, present. Do have a quorum established. At this time, we will have our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
And we have two more.
All right, Mr. Hawksworth here. We'll wait for him for opening prayer, and then we'll go ahead and get started with our workshop.
And Mr. Matt Slayton. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Thank you, Mr. Hawksworth.
Thank you. You ready?
Yeah.
Dear Lord, thank you for letting that train finally come to an end. Please be with us today and make decisions in the best interest of the students of this district. We love you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move out towards the group room for our workshop.
All right, so we are here today to do our next round of budget workshop. The last one we did, we brought to you the staffing plan that we brought in April for the board to approve, so thank you again for that. I know our principals have been diligently hiring. The applicant pool has been great. We've had a lot of good options as they're filling spots on campuses for our new adds to the budget. So at this point, we are ready to talk compensation plan for staff. House Bill 2 was signed by Governor Abbott yesterday. So things are progressing. Still a lot of definitions to be defined, and we'll kind of talk through that, but I will turn it over to Ms. Stewart and Dr. Daniel.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to start today. We're going to go over just kind of a quick review of the April board meeting or board workshop of what we talked about in our last budget board workshop. We're going to look at what is actually included in House Bill 2, the main school funding bill, the impact that it will have on us individually. Dr. Daniel is going to talk about the compensation plan. We'll look at just the overall budget outlook from here, and then what our next steps are. So if y'all recall from April, we brought a staffing plan during that workshop that included the different budget priorities from the staff survey input. And it really was maintaining our class size ratios and focusing on the learning environment so that we put the support back into the classrooms that was needed. And there's a link here if you want to go back out and look at that staffing plan, but I know we've been over that in the workshop, and then we had y'all approve it. And as Dr. Carpenter mentioned, grateful for that, moving forward with hiring and getting staff focused for next year. The big picture that we talked about from April that we did campus allocations, like what we've done in the past. Just a reminder that our departments did the zero-based budgeting again this year, which we started for last year. Again, you've had the staffing plan approved. We talked about reserving compensation plan of $2 million tentatively when we were talking through some things. This was before we had legislation. And at that point in time, by making that reservation, it looked like we were going to have a budget deficit of about $1.4 million. So that's kind of where we ended it in April, and approved the staffing plan from there. But again, we're in a legislative year, right? It's 89th legislative. They went January through June, finished June 2nd, and they approved probably the largest school funding bill, infusing $8.5 billion into public schools. Most of it was very directed into how it can be used, but we will walk through a few of those, and I can tell you we're grateful for a school funding bill. It may not have been the most ideal side that the House had. It leaned more towards what the Senate had, but it still will be a benefit for Argyle ISD, and it's going to help our budget out drastically. So I will tell you though, the interpretation is changing, right? You get a bill that's 100 and something pages long. It takes a while to interpret that, and so each day we get a little bit of new information about, okay, well there was this in there and there was that in there. So that's kind of where we're in the wait and see portion of that right now, and kind of wait till we get all the interpretation and all of the information out of what actually was contained in there and how does that apply to us as a school district. This is just a summary. This was provided by a group here in North Texas, housed out of Frisco ISD, and it just kind of goes over the highlights of the school funding here. Of course, compensation was the leading thing in there. They created also a new allotment called the ABC. It was for an allotment for basic costs. That was kind of the compromise between the House and the Senate. There was additional school safety funding. There was quite a bit of infused into special education. And then there was a $55 increase to the basic allotment, but that was really money moved from another spot into the basic allotment. It really wasn't a true increase there. So, again, $55, but they froze the guaranteed yield. And so they took the money that was to increase, because by law, every year the guaranteed yield had to increase. And so that money is what's transitioned now into the $55 per ODA. The teacher retention allotment, they specifically here defined, well, they haven't defined yet, they specifically said classroom teacher. So we're all waiting on a definition of classroom teacher, because how that is defined determines who the state will pay for as far as the teachers that we have and the staff on that. So 3 to 4 year classroom teacher, $2,500, 5 plus is $5,000. You'll notice they left out 0, 1, and 2 year teachers on that. They did a support staff retention allotment of $45 for adjusted ADA. That they have said was intended to produce some funds that could cover the 0, 1, and 2 years, or support staff other than administrators, but administrators were written out of that allotment. Again, the ABC allotment, it was the allotment for basic cost at $106 per ADA. The SPED allotment is going to transition to an intensity-based services, so it will be a year before we know what that looks like and how that applies to us, because they will have to go back, define it first, and then see how it applies to every student that is in special ed after that, before they can tell us how much it would affect the funding. The school safety allotment, the amount per ADA doubled, and then the amount per campus went up a little over double. There's also quite a bit in teacher incentive allotment. We are not part of that program right now, so we don't have an implication on that. We are moving towards that, but it doesn't affect us for next year. And then there are quite a few changes in early education allotment. What we can say is there's additional support for pre-K out of that. And then they also included, again, they use the term classroom teacher. A classroom teacher's child is allowed to go for free. They qualify now under the state's plan for pre-K.
Is there any way to get retro pay on that?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, okay, I was just checking.
Yeah, sorry. That does start September 1st, or really for the school year.
On the teacher incentive allotment, I've read the plan that was in place before. Do we have to follow that, or can we create our own?
For that money, it's the way they define it.
Okay.
It's the way it's defined.
We can't claim district of
No,
innovation.
and they're actually
Right.
they're actually changing some of the district innovation allowances as well. There's going to be some things that we probably have in ours currently that we'll have to undo.
We're talking about House Bill 2 tonight, but there are a lot of bills that were passed, and there's a lot of different bills that affect public schools, and so there's going to be months of things that we're going to have to interpret and figure out how it affects
Well,
us and what it
to your
does.
point, I read one where it said school safety law per ADA was 28. So I've seen it both, I've seen it in two different places, two different numbers, so which one is it?
Those are things that we're going to find out in the
Yeah.
next days, weeks, and a couple months, so. How does House Bill 2 affect Argyle ISD? So any numbers that we're showing you tonight were numbers that were provided for us from one of the agencies that we talked to and helped interpret some of the legislation for us. This is not, we don't have a tool yet to run the numbers ourselves and see how it will affect us. So everything we're using, this will change once we get that tool and can use our own numbers, but this is pretty standard through numbers that anybody has done for us. And it looks pretty similar. So the basic allotment increase will look like about $315,000 for us. We will lose the guaranteed yield of about $180,000, so that is that offset there. The classroom teacher allotment, everybody's assuming how that's being defined right now. Based on that, it would be just under 1.6 million. Support staff allotment, just over 250,000. The allotment for basic cost is right at 700,000. Early education, 120. School safety allotment, 175. The SPED allotment is still to be determined, and the teacher incentive allotment in the future when we are part of that program is still to be determined. So total big picture, and this isn't everything in the bill. These were just some of the highlighted points. But total big picture, M&O revenues are expected to go up just under 3.3 million, and the mandated expenditures that we can define right now go up about 1.2 million. So we know there's going to be some additional expenditures that come out of that. Those are just what we've defined so far. And I'm going to repeat again, all of these numbers will change as we get tools to run these with our most recent data.
And this is annualized based on current enrollment
Yes.
or
Well,
attendance.
What they had is our ADA for next year, which is probably lower than what we're estimating.
Oh, okay.
So you'll hear the word unknown a lot. And so here are some of the big unknowns that deal with compensation. One is, what is the definition of the classroom teacher for pay purposes? When you think classroom teacher, that seems pretty simple. But we have instructional specialists that are on campuses that are paid on the teacher pay scale. They're defined as a teacher according to PEAMS, which we'll get into that later. And so are they included or are they not included? That's just one example. Also, the $2,500 and $5,000 pay increases, is that a stipend or is that part of the pay scale? Because when it becomes part of the pay scale, it affects the rest of the pay scale, especially the 0 to 2 teachers, your teachers who, the way that the bill is written, it didn't include them to this degree. And then will there be 2 different pay scales depending upon the definition of classroom teacher? We're leaning towards one right now, but that's still one of the unknowns. And as far as how we have to report, I mentioned this just a little bit ago, like an instructional specialist. I mean, they're defined a little bit differently in BEAMS. And so this is all going to most likely be based on how people are coded in PEAMS. And so we really need to take a close look at that and make sure everybody is, we know our teachers are coded correctly. It's just some of the other positions. And then if a staff member is on the administrative pay scale and they actually teach classes, does that fall into the classroom teacher definition? And these are questions not just for us. These are questions that everybody has.
In talking to our Denton County group, these are kind of the standing questions everybody's waiting on.
And then as far as the compensation plan, the way that House Bill 2 was written, House Bill 2 will cover what you see up here, classroom teachers with 3 to 4 years of experience, the $2,500, which is about 4%. 5+ years, about 8%, which is the $5,000. And then non-administrative staff, everybody but administrators, that's where the $45 per adjusted ADA, that money goes towards that.
Are these numbers, the 25 and the 5, is this
That's defined in
each year in the biennium and no guarantees after that? I mean, where's,
It depends on how they
That's
define
what
it.
we're
well,
waiting.
exactly,
If it's gonna be
yeah,
base or if it's gonna be stipend.
right, okay.
And then what's not currently covered are teachers with 0 to 2 years of experience, and then all the others that weren't in that first category, administrative staff. And so what I'll mention here is that what's not covered by House Bill 2, what we are looking at in our compensation plan is an increase of 3.5% for teachers with 0 to 2 years of experience, which equates to about $2,100. And then all others would be at 3.5% as well. Does that make sense so far?
Is there an ETA on when this will be defined? Because it's a calendar year, August 1 through,
We've been given in the next days, weeks, and couple of months. That's what we've been told.
but August 1st is like day one of the calendar, right, or September 1st?
Well, September, I mean, our budget will be approved, and some districts are July 1, so they're adopting budgets right now and having to put some language, which we will do the same. We will put some language in the compensation plan if the board chooses to approve it at the June 16th meeting. That's all dependent upon definitions and all of that of House Bill 2. So that's what districts are doing at this point that are going ahead and adopting.
And the amount will be an approximate amount, I think. And then this is just a breakdown of kind of the way that our staff, the numbers that fall into each of those categories. So you'll see in the first column, the number of teachers who have 3 to 4 years of experience, more than 5 years, and then the other non-administrative roles. And those are the black and white. I mean, that's what House Bill 2 covers on the left. And then in red on the right are those that are not covered under House Bill 2.
And these are on this past year's, some of those 37 will roll into the next one, and some of the 18 will roll in, just because they're rolling up. But that's what we just were able to pull from this past year.
And again, our compensation plan, of course, that we're going to bring to you is going to include what we talked about here. It's not going to include just what House Bill 2 covers. It's going to be it will be what House Bill 2 covers, the additional money that we get from House Bill 2. But it's not as defined. It's only defined for those teachers in those
So you're gonna
areas.
give us what you think here is what the state's gonna help cover, plus what the district would cover on the stuff on the right, for you, the
Correct.
right-hand side of the page?
We're gonna give you the whole package.
The whole thing, okay.
So that brings us to what our tentative budget outlook is at this point. And again, I want to remind you, it's tentative. I don't have a tool to run this myself, so we're relying on other resources at this point in time. So we do have, of course, what our revenue expenditures were prior to the bill, estimated at. Then we've got an estimate, and the one that we chose for this was Moat Casey's revenue estimate of what the change from House Bill 2 is to get us the total revenue. We've got our base budget that we've been working on and discussing. We had some changes from the department and campus budgets. We had some staffing plan that was approved already. And then we've got an updated comp plan. So we think it will take us $2.5 million to cover everything that was outlined tonight. That's all of the, everything defined by House Bill 2 and everything that will be presented that's not defined by House Bill 2. And then that, you can see there, it's a nice blue number, not red, would leave us a surplus, a little over 1.6 million. So it's a much different outlook today than it was a year ago. Much different outlook than it was a few months ago. So that's why I'm coming to say that was House Bill 2 everything we wanted? No. But is it helping us? It absolutely is. Is it providing funds for teacher raises? Yes, it is. So there's quite a bit of good out of that $8.5 billion bill that we can pull into AISD. That's going to help us quite a bit. It's going to help all of our staff members. But we're going to point out these numbers are going to change. As we get more interpretation, as we find out more, we're going to fine tune these numbers. We can run our own tool. There's also other bills out there that affect finances. There is a homestead bill. There's another homestead bill for the over 65. So some of that, it should be a wash, right? The state should give us any money that we lose in there, but we don't have those tools yet. And as I've mentioned in the, briefly, when we've talked about the values and how they progress through the state and go through the property value, remember we talked about the fact that our numbers that were sent in from DCAD this past year were wrong? And that number, we won't get a new number until August for this past year. The estimate that we have changes that over $1 million in revenue for this year that we've already finished. So any of those homestead exemptions require more data from the appraisal district to go in, and that creates another way that we have to really watch and see, is that data accurate? You know, are we getting that funding that we're losing from the tax side? And so that's going to be a continuing battle that we've got to fight and make sure that our AISD is receiving the funds that it should. And it could be throughout the year as you figure that out, or at year end when you figure that out. So
whatever this blue number ends up being, after all this shakes out, does that go to fund balance?
it would, yes, it would. And this is, we do know we have some other things. I know Dr. Daniel has identified a few more positions in working with the principals based on numbers that are already enrolled that will be needed for next year, and so that will be coming to you. So we know some of that will change, but it's not going to change by 1.6 million. Unless there's something major in that bill that not any of us have found yet. So again, it's a much different outlook. So it's something that we can be happy about. And we can look here and say that, you know, we're providing we're doing this, we're putting teachers back in the classroom, we're putting the support staff back in, and it's enabling us to be able to bring a good comp plan to the district. So, you know, we'd be happy to take any questions on this part of it at this point. So.
Your revenue estimate, is that based on your percentage with the people that are protesting? It's the lowest number you've got, basically?
Yes,
If
I've
that-
dropped that
how you
out based
vote.
on what we feel like it'll drop down to by July.
Okay.
So we started out, property values were up over 20% when they first gave us our values in April 30th, I believe. And we look at what historically that comes down. And so we're using, I think, just over 13% in our estimates.
Okay.
I got one comment.
Yes, sir.
Hi. I like this 1.6 million surplus. I think, you know, we're building back up the fund balance is important. I'm going to reiterate, I think, things I've said in the past, which are, I don't know that we've quite gotten to the point where we've replaced all the cuts that we made in terms of support staff. And I don't think that we're going to achieve the class size ratios, particularly at the elementary school levels, that I would just like to see, because we don't have space. And that's going to be the case for the next 2 years. And therefore, I would see this 1.6 million or some portion of that being well invested in those elementary school hallways, replacing those support positions, and supporting those classrooms that may have larger class sizes than we desire for those next 2 years. That would be just one good source of that revenue, or at least that I think would be.
Yes.
So is it your goal to get back where we were before we had to make all those cuts?
Not necessarily, but I do think that we had to increase the class sizes a little bit last year, and then we're probably going to have to hold that for the next 2 years because we just don't have the space.
Right.
And I think one way you get, if you can't pay teachers what they may deserve, one way you can overcome that is support them in a way that they're not supported in other districts.
Couldn't agree more, but the only problem I foresee with that is that when you do have the space, you either, I guess you move that support staff into permanent,
Teaching
but
positions.
that's your recruiting space.
Those are,
The only reason I asked the original question was because I think it was we didn't want to go through the drill you guys had to go through on finding places to save money for the reasons we had to do it. But it is a good drill to go through to see where you're fat, so to speak, right? So that's the only reason I say that is I don't know that going back to that number is somewhere close to that number's probably accurate, but just not, I don't want to go back to that just because that's where we were.
And we added back pretty close to everything except we did one specialist at each campus versus two right now. So,
And we've got more kids.
and we have.
The lower class size.
Right, in the lower class, we're looking right now at about 19 and 20, but then that, by the time we get to the summer, we've already found two, we're gonna have to go ahead and add that we didn't know, we think we were in March, based on what's already enrolled in Q. So, we'll keep monitoring that all summer. And utilizing every classroom we have. I think we've officially filled up every classroom.
At JRE.
At JRE and at Hilltop.
We're making one structural change at South to free up classroom. Oh, sorry, Jerry.
Jerry and South.
Yes. All right.
Did you have any questions about the amounts? Or had you looked, you go back one more. That one, no, that one. That one. Did you have any questions on kind of the amounts we were, okay. If there was anything that you wanted to ask there. Okay.
Well, so teachers, years 1 through 3 or 1 through 2 are not gonna get raises, which, I mean, I can understand first year teachers maybe.
They will. We have them in here. It's just
Another
being-
place not covered.
We have them in here, right.
They just weren't called out.
Right.
By bill.
So if you'll go, will you go to that next chart? So what we did is we broke them down into what House Bill 2, what we interpret being covered and what we interpret not being covered. But it's all still included in the compensation package. It's just not coming from the earmarked allotment for teachers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So kind of our next steps, again, it's a much easier conversation right now than what we have been going through. We're going to continue to look at the school finance language and really any bill that affects school districts, whether it's finance or not, the interpretation of it and the steps to implement it for our AISD. On the 16th at your regular board meeting, you'll be asked to consider the staff compensation plan. We'll also have some preliminary legislative impacts on some of the bills. We'll also update that in July because, again, that's going to be a continued process as we find out more information. And then in August, we plan on adopting our budget and tax rate at the August meeting. If something happens with interpretation of it and we're still working on the tax rate, then that can go to the September meeting. But our intent would be August for both and to have that done. Any questions?
No, looks great. Hopefully no
Much different
surprises.
position to be sitting in, right?
Yeah,
It
much
is.
better.
Yeah, I mean, we're still seeing a lot of districts that are still in deficits, even with all of this, so. we're
And y'all may
very
have said
glad.
this before I got here, but I do think, I hope y'all said this before I got here, that, Dr. Carpenter and Liz, y'all deserve a lot of credit for, staying really active in terms of getting legislation passed and communicating with the state representatives. I think y'all were in direct dialogue with them, like in real time as these bills were coming together, and you've done a great job of having those relationships that they contact you and get your feedback. And Liz, you're always available, and it's hard to interpret those things in real time. And so I just, even though the bill's not exactly how we would like it, and we would like more liberty than the bill gives us, I just want to commend y'all for the effort you put into it, the community, how you activated the community and the staff and mobilized them and utilized them. And I think that, we're seeing the benefits of that. So I'm sure they said that before I got here.
Well,
We were
and
waiting for repeatedly.
Okay.
We just didn't know.
Let me
what
I
Josh said.
I'm sure. Yeah.
and, you know, everyone knows we've engaged some of our staff this spring, or in winter, took them down there, and Maddie Fairchild and Stephen Orlowski and Katie Hayden. And even yesterday afternoon, I was in a Zoom with them with Raise Your Hand Texas, and they're already focused on, we have 18 months until the next one starts. And so they're already thinking what they're going to do for galvanizing, you know, and taking that momentum and moving forward. And they've got some ideas that they're going to continue to engage more staff and families and our legislators. And you're right, they did. They would call 10 o'clock at night, you know, just got off the floor. This is what we know. How does this impact? So we appreciate that relationship with them, and they trust us enough to call and ask us that we're going to give them real information. So.
And I can't reiterate, I mean, we have real skeptics of public ed in our representatives.
Yes.
I mean, they're not, I mean, they are skeptical
Right.
of public education and whether those are good investments sometimes, but I think you've done a good job of establishing credibility with them and confidence with them that, you know, we are a good school district, we are a conservative, responsible school district, and they want your feedback on it. So, you know, that's a valuable resource that we have.
I was also going to say publicly that I know you, Liz, Chris, the three people sitting over there for sure. I know you all had a hand with your team and Dr. Jordan and everybody, and the effort that you made to keep both the public and the staff continually informed. You know, come help us. This is what we know. This is what we need. This is what we're thinking. Here are the places for you to connect and communicate. And I think it was really, really important. And then the email that you put out to the staff, and I guess the public as well recently, that kind of highlighted some things. I think it's great because many times, sometimes a staff member, a teacher, an aide, or somebody, bus driver, whoever, are like the last people to just really know and understand. And it allows them a place to be able to ask questions and, you know, be informed. So, you know, I appreciate that you guys, as a team, that you all did that.
And people think it doesn't matter,
Right.
I know.
but House Bill 2 was about a $9.1 billion bill. They sent it to the Senate. The Senate really butchered it. And they were about to pass that out of committee. You activated the community. I mean, I don't know if their school district did it more, but a lot of school districts did. You know, I know Sam and Craig and everybody, all y'all were communicating. And another half $500 million got put back in that bill that the Senate, I mean, so it did matter. You know, they cut it about $1 billion out of it, and they put a $500 million back in it, and it mattered.
We were told we had about 900 emails from this community within about a 72-hour time period to the senator's office. So,
It is interesting to think when you're making these calls to aides and leaving messages at offices and talking directly to senators and representatives, like, does this really matter? Like, are they really gonna do anything?
Yeah.
So getting that validation just should be shared with the community.
Right.
Like exactly what Mr. Westrom just said, like, you know, your efforts help contribute to $500 million getting added back to public ed.
okay. I think that's all we have. Okay. Welcome, Dr. Jordan.
Just in time.
My God.
Can you put her slides up?
Are you ready for yours now?
You're late.
Were you at the train?
I just can't
We skipped
We got here 5 minutes ago.
We skipped the 6 slides that we wanted.
Yeah, we'll go back to them.
Does anyone else have anything? All right, we'll adjourn this workshop at 4:41 p.m.